Welcome, everybody. We have an outstanding guest joining us today, and I'm going to be introducing him in just a minute. But first, I want to give a word from our sponsors. The Pressing the Limits podcast is brought to you by ZionMissionaryChurch.net, where you can listen and watch messages, share prayer requests, or even find out how to plan a visit. And also by the newly updated NeuroPowerSource.com. And these are resources for your mind, your body, and your spirit. There's discount codes for all the recommended gear that I use, including all kinds of tools and resources to help you along your journey. Well, let's jump into this today. I want to tell you about our guest, Bert Sorin. Bert is a 4-time Division I All-American track and field Southeastern Conference champion in the hammer and the 35-pound weight throw. He also is a former record holder in that. He was an Olympic trials athlete. Bert is currently the president and co-owner of Sorin-X Exercise Equipment, which is a very successful family-run business, which is founded by his father, who is another huge name in the iron game, Richard Sorin. A lot of you know that he is one of the original grip masters, kind of put grip on the map there with a lot of his feats. Together, they are the inventors of hardware and applications to make people more effective, efficient, and safe on the sports field and the battlefield. Although Sorin never served in the armed forces, his gear is changing the game to provide readiness and rebuilding to veterans prior to, during, and after their deployments to far-off and hostile lands. Bert's network of veterans, scientists, coaches, and therapists allows for a combination of expertise and support and has been changing lives on both sides of the table. Bert pushes each day to find the best in people and to assist in their exploration of their potential and maximize their value to the cause. Bert is beyond honored to be a part of this team and to have his ability and the ability to use his gifts to serve those who have given this country so much. Welcome to the show, Bert Sorin, the man.
Oh, gosh. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
how you guys doing?
Oh, fantastic. And I think people are really going to be inspired by your journey because you had an interesting way that you came about becoming a track and field champion. Can you share with us how you got started in athletics?
Sure. So I've lifted weights to an extent. Anytime if you're Richard Sorin's son, you're going to lift some weights. You're going to interface with it at least. Since I was a young child, and I think my first double body weight deadlift, I was maybe 8 years old because it was 112 pounds, so I weighed 52 pounds, which is hilarious. So I was always around the weights. I wouldn't say I loved training, and I didn't train necessarily. I just would kind of play with it because at that age, you're not on a real training program. But I always respected it, and I always saw value in it, so it was a great piece of my youth. And then I started training seriously for athletics. I would say in 9th grade. I think I was 12, 13 years old, whatever it is, and that's I've trained multiple times a week since then. I'm 43 now, so my athletic career was pretty short in high school, or kind of abbreviated. I tried to wrestle my freshman year, but they kept wanting me to lose weight, and I wanted to be big and strong, so there was a bit of a conflict of interest there. And I liked the effort and I liked the work, but I also liked the idea of not being skinny, and that wasn't part of the program. So I really went back to my first love, which was hunting and fishing and being in the outdoors. And as an only child, you could find a lot of fun out in the wilderness, and you don't have to rely on anyone. So I went right back to that. In my junior and senior year, I decided to throw the discus. And in some way, I'd been exposed to it. My dad was a champion discus thrower, and decided to try that. And, partly to make him happy, but I also enjoyed it and enjoyed the individual aspect of it. Wasn't very good, so there was no college offers or anything like that coming at the end of my career. I was definitely recreational athlete. So I went to the University of South Carolina in 1994, and for the fall, to be a normal college kid. And I would say probably more of the idea of being a college kid, like from the 80s movies, sounded really cool.
Yeah.
so I'd seen all the movies like, oh, college is going to be like that. And it was for about the first 6 or 7 days until I decided I needed to go take a workout. So I called my dad, and I knew we had built the weightlifting equipment at the university's athletic facility. And I said, well, at least I get to go and lift on some good stuff because the PE center wasn't that good. Maybe I could pull a favor. And Dad said, sure, let me call the coach and see if it's okay. And so he called down there. The coach said, yeah, have him come down after the athletes are done this evening. And I was 17 years old, so my attention span's very short, and I didn't remember what time he said, so I just got done eating lunch and screwing around. I said, well, I'm just going to go lift. So I went down there, and I walked into the University of South Carolina's weight room, and if you've ever been into a weight room in August, you realize that every athlete on campus is there at the same time at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Everyone's out of class, and so it's just an absolute gong show. And in the 90s, there weren't the rules where you had to have South Carolina gear on or anything. So everyone's just wearing different stuff, and no one knows each other. It's the first week of school. So I just kind of cruise in and don't say anything to anyone. I go over and start doing power cleans and lift for a while. And I watch some people over in the corner, and they're doing vertical jump testing. I said, that looks awesome. Because I'm thinking like Rocky IV diagnostic kind of thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I go over there, and they measure me, and I just get in line like Forrest Gump, like I just get in line, and they measure, and I jump, and it was like 29.5 inches. And they're like, hey, that's pretty good. I'm like, okay, cool. And I walked off, and then I go back, I'm bench pressing, and then I look over, and they're doing body fat testing. I said, oh, that looks cool too. I want to try that. So I go and get in line, and there's a man sitting down, and I walk up, and I'm the next person up. And he goes, okay, what's your name and what sport? And I'm like, oh, crap. I'm kind of, what do you say? I thought this was like a ride I just kind of got to go on. I don't think there was going to be an actual accountability there. So I told him my name, and of course he didn't know who I was. And he said, what sport? I said, well, I'm thinking about walking on to the track team in the spring to be a shot put and discus thrower, which was about 1% true, maybe. It was more just get this guy off my back, and I'll tell him a sport that actually exists here, so he'll kind of believe me, so I could get this thing done and go back to my life as a college kid. He goes, oh, really? He goes, how far did you? What did he say? What did you get at the state championship? Like, what did you score? And I said, well, I didn't last year, and I wasn't very good. He goes, well, how far did you throw? And I told him. He goes, well, that's not very good. I said, well, right, I know it's not very good. I didn't say I was good. I was kind of sucked. So I was getting a little miffed. And he kind of stopped. He goes, well, my name is Larry Judge. I'm the throws coach at the University of South Carolina, and I'll see you tomorrow at practice. And I'm like, son of a gun, like out of all the people I could have lied to on this entire campus, it happens to be the one guy that could call me on it and basically open the door and see if I was going to walk through it. So I said, okay, coach, yeah, I'll try to make it. That sounds good. Just totally BSing my way out of it. And he goes, no, if you're going to be on the team, you will make it. Oh, that's what I said. I go, well, this is August. That's a spring sport. He goes, you're in college now, son. This is a lifetime thing. This is full time. I said, oh gosh. So he said, well, you're going to make it if you want to be on the team tomorrow. I said, okay. So I kind of finished up my stuff, and I went back to my dorm room, and didn't have a cell phone at the time. So I called my dad with my dorm phone. He was like, how's your workout go? I said, well, I think I'm on the track team now. He's like, what? And you got to understand, because Dad was at the time, like when he came through South Carolina, he was the top rated discus thrower in the nation out of high school. So it was like he was the dude. And, he, of course, felt immediately that I was trying to make him happy to walk in his footsteps, which sounded great, but there was no inkling that was even a possibility. It was, I don't know what just happened. I had a weird conversation. Now I'm on a sports team. And, I'm going to show up tomorrow and see what it's about. And so didn't intend to go to play college sports whatsoever. Showed up and went to practice. And as they say, the rest is history. And then I fell in love with training and with the results that you could get from training. Because when I was put into a group of people that I didn't know at the time was one of the top 3 or 4 programs in the nation in the throws, I just didn't know. It was like playing your first football game with the Patriots. You just don't know. You walk on the field, you go, hey, that guy's pretty good at it. Like, yeah, that's Tom Brady. You're like, who's that? And that was what occurred. And I just because I knew so little, I just chased the best people because they were the people around me. And before I knew it, I was pretty good just based on I was at the right place because good was not good in that group.
Mm-hmm.
Great was okay in that group. And so you just chase the best guys. I mean, two of my female teammates had the number 1 and 2 throw in the world that year. And so I was used to seeing world's records broken every weekend. That's just what you do. And being in that training environment was so competitive and so fulfilling to me, and it became literally addictive. I've never been addicted to any drugs or anything, but I could understand how that dopamine hit. Every 4 weeks we had a max out, and I just remember just being so emotionally connected to the idea that I got to cash out. I saw it as cashing out. I got to put money in for a week or a month, and interest built fast, and then I got to cash out every 4 weeks, and I got addicted to it. And so for almost years, I would think I PR'd on every 4 weeks, and I PR'd in meets all the time, and I got addicted to success, and that was how my athletic career started. And my 5th year there, I was team captain, SEC record holder, 4-time All-American, and then went on to compete in 2 Olympic trials. Somewhat self-coached at that time. My college coach would help me out every once in a while, but I had a real job and tried to make an Olympic team, which is, I wouldn't suggest that. It's not the easiest thing to do, and so I fell a bit short, but everything worked out in the end. So that's the athletic career in a nutshell.
And I think that's just so inspirational to people to know that you can walk on and you can become a champion. You can become a leader. And so let's talk a little bit about this. How important, and you talk about this whole, cashing in, cashing out. How important is it for people to understand consistency in training?
It's the most important thing. Intensity is huge, but consistency is where everything happens, and you just show up. What I actually found that out of my scholastic career as well. At the beginning, it was kind of funny. At the beginning of my scholastic career, I was not a good thrower. I was weak, and I had bad grades. At the end of my career, I was All-American and all Dean's List, whatever. And so what I found was success begat success. If I was doing the right things, my early career, I said, well, I'm going to be a great thrower and do the little as possible so I can conserve energy and time. I'm going to do a little as possible scholastically so I can be a great thrower, because that's what I love. But I learned that if I did great in school, I had more time to rest and train and eat, and less stress that came on me from the coaches yelling at me. Then I was in a great mood. I had no stress when I went away on the meets for the weekends, and I was able to compete. So I found that being on how you do anything is how you do everything, and being on top of your game and being successful is just a mindset. It's not, you can't cherry pick it. And that's when I learned that. And I had to learn it the hard way. I had to learn it through having to go to summer school to keep my grades up the first couple of years, until I went, hold on, I'm doing this all wrong. I'm doing this backwards. I can't expect success here and put in crap work over here. But what that came down to was, scholastically, it just meant that I showed up to all my classes and did my homework. Really, it was pretty easy. You just had to show up. But I would find, well, I'm really tired from a squat workout yesterday. I need extra sleep, so I'll blow this class off. And you're 18 because you're stupid. So, but then I just found, just do the hard work, do it consistently, and then that translated later into life. I found that probably just about everything that I'm better than average at is stuff that I've been doing at least 10 years. And so what I garner from that information is, I'm not that great or talented. You'll just be better than most people if you keep doing it. If they quit in 3 years and you keep going to 10, you're going to be better than most people. And because you have 3 times as much time under the bar, time in the ring, or time on the field, or whatever it may be. So I've been, since then, for the last 20-something years, I've been a guy that's picked what I want to do and just do it longer than everybody else, whether that be business or whether it be the outdoors or hunting, fishing, throwing, lifting, whatever it is. I'm kind of, if I'm in, I'm in.
I love that because it is so important that people show up, because that's one of the things I find today so often is people are looking for the perfect program, and it doesn't matter, how great the program is if you don't show up and do it. If you don't commit, if you're not all in, if you're not that, that level of commitment, that level of passion, it's not going to work. And, that reminds me of, I've heard some rumors, and
oh boy,
I heard that you had an interesting plan and strategy when it came to getting enough food as an athlete in school. Can you share a little bit about that, about how that worked?
Yeah. Oh, sure. So I didn't have a lot of money at the time. I'm a kid, right? You don't have any money. And I only had a 10 meal a week plan. That's all we could afford at the time for college. So the other was like, hey, just kind of figure it out, right? So now I'm in college, and I have caloric needs in excess of normal college kids because I'm 6'2", 170 pounds trying to throw an implement in the SEC. And the average guy is 240 to 270, so I'm 100 pounds underweight in some cases. So the coach is like, you got to throw farther if you want to be on this team. So it's like, okay, number one rule, I got to throw further. How am I going to do that? I got to be bigger. I got to be stronger. Okay, I could lift. I could put effort in. I could show up to the workouts. I'll get stronger. All right, but I have to recover and get bigger. I have to have food. How am I going to get food? So we had some alternate methods. So I not invented, but I used to call it free stuffing. So I knew where we lived in downtown Columbia, so I knew where all of the fast food restaurants were, obviously, because they're cheap. But I also knew when they closed. And so I knew McDonald's on UG Street, that closed at 11. So if you got there at about 10:53 to 10:55, you could roll through the drive-thru, and if you sweet talk the girl in the window, she'd give you all the fries that they're about to throw, because they have to throw the food away at the end of the day. And so I might buy a burger and get like 3 bags full of fries. And so then I'd hit all the fast food places. And so my roommates and we'd mow down on like an extra 2,000 calories before we go to bed. But what I was able to do is put 30 pounds on in a semester. I went from 172 to 199, so almost 30 pounds. And my squat went from 320 for a single to 445 for 5. And I remember coming home and people were like, you're on steroids. I'm like, no, I just eat a bunch of stuff, but it worked because every 4 weeks I was stronger, but I had to figure out a way to solve the problem. And that again kind of laid the groundwork for not groundwork for what Dad's done, but what he did. And then how I did at Sornex is always solve the problem. Whatever the training problem is, you figure out innovative training solutions to solve it. For me, the innovative training solution was go get free food that people are about to throw away. And then later we moved our training facility downtown Columbia, right near Williams-Brice Stadium. And this is kind of, some people may find this to be a bit grotesque or whatever, but it was right beside the Pennington seed plant. They made bird seed. Well, doves would land on the power lines above that and then just drop down and eat bird seed. Well, I was like, well, doves are great to eat. So I would take my BB gun to practice, which is crazy to think that a college team would allow me to bring a pellet rifle to practice. In between throws, I'd pick doves off of the power lines and drop them. And then I'd pick them up on my way to the weight room. I'd go lift, I'd take them home and clean them and eat them. And I was like, hey, free meal. Yeah. But you figure out a way to solve it. So that's right. When I hear people go, well, I don't have this, or I don't have that, I don't have this, I go, you're just not trying hard enough. You don't want it bad enough.
I love that. And so to all the college kids listening, for that tip, you're welcome. Be thanking Bert Sorin there. You're going to have all kinds of college kids showing up at closing time in all these college towns all across the United States.
Oh, yeah. The best one was I got to be friends with the Chick-fil-A people. And everyone knows, Chick-fil-A is like some of the tastiest stuff on earth. And that cat would give me the sandwiches at the end of the day. And you talk like a $4 sandwich. You get like 8 or 10 of those. And there is nothing better when you're 18 years old than 10 free chicken sandwiches.
That's a hot little tip if you're in college. I remember 4th meal, 5th meal, all kinds of meals in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. That's the best.
Oh, yeah, all the coupons that was excellent.
And so this is what I think people really love about you and what they connect with you about is you have do whatever it takes attitude. I think that's, the way the business is. I think that's the way you've been in your life. Can you give any examples of some of the sacrifices or disciplines that you've had to undertake because it is that whatever it takes attitude?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that came, I guess I'll preface this with, I don't understand how someone couldn't have that attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It to me, it seems necessary for life, but I guess it's necessary for acceleration and growth, and maybe everyone's mindset isn't there, unfortunately, but that's it. But I mean, back in 1985, 88, we were building a big weight room, and it was the University of Kentucky, and it was a weight room that was greatly over our capacity to build. I mean, it was the big room of the year. We hadn't done any of these big giant custom rooms, and Dad believed that we could do it and believed that we can make some amazing stuff. And he had to literally sell his house to pay for the material for the room. I mean, to build the room, hoping that when it all came down, he could then lease the house back from the other owner so he'd have a place to live, but knew we had to get that job in order to get on the map as Sorin Equipment at the time. And, and if you hear stuff like that, and he was like, yeah, I didn't have any food either. And one of his friends used to work at a fried chicken place, and a kid that he mentored. So when he would get off work, he would hang a bag of chicken on Dad's doorstep. And so Dad would, get up in the middle of the night. If there was chicken there, he's like, I had dinner. If not, well, you just didn't, and but the drive for what he wanted the company to be was so great that he just did whatever it took to do it. And so that, just being around that all the time, was like, oh, no isn't an option. Like, no doesn't exist. Failure doesn't exist. There's just delayed success. You just haven't figured out how to succeed yet. It's going to happen. And then you just build a mentality of, it's going to happen. I just have to crack the code. And if that means we have to sell a house to do it and live somewhere, if it means like when my father had cancer, 15 years ago, and I ran Sorin X out of his kitchen, using web TV and kitchen, and I would work all day at night, and then in the evenings I'd go in and put up drywall and build our gym out by hand. That's what we had to do in 2005, and we just went through a string of bad luck, and some things happened, and you do what you got to do. And he dumped his full life savings into the business, and that's a stressful thing when your dad looks at you after just coming out of surgery and goes, hey, I'm giving you all the money that I've been able to put together my entire life, and I'm doing this to keep the business afloat, and I believe in you enough to hopefully that you could pay me back one day. And you're like, okay, the pressure just got real. My dad, who gave me this opportunity, now is relying on me not only to keep it afloat, but somehow be profitable enough and excess enough where I could literally pay him back his life savings through my efforts. And I'll be honest, like, those couple years, I don't remember. Like, I don't like to use like a PTSD, but the stress during those years was so high, I think I've just kind of blocked it out. Like, I just remember, wow, that sucked. And I remember doing a lot of drywall and being in the kitchen. And I remember taking care of Pops. But after that, I couldn't really tell you what happened. But I think you do enough things like that, and you do them, and then you get out of it. And the success isn't like overnight. It's like, whoa, we're great now. 2005 sucked. And then you just kind of realize in 2007 that it doesn't suck as bad. And then you go, oh, we're still here. Imagine that. And then in 2009, it's better. And you're like, we're still here. And then 2011, it really starts kicking off. And everyone's like, dude, you guys blew up. And you're like, were you around for the last 5 years? But it's okay. You can't put your value in what other people think you've done or not done. You just have to keep doing it. And then if you're doing something extraordinary or above board, eventually the world will respond with positive reinforcement. But you can't wait for it. You can't say, well, I'm going to do this for 3 years and I'm going to succeed. You can't do that. You just got to go until you don't. That's what it boils down to.
That gets me fired up right now, because anybody that would, the house, all those things, and I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that so many people look and they say, wow, they've had everything handed to them, or wow, when they look at success, a lot of times, you know what I'm talking about? People often look at success and they say, wow, I wish I could do that. And I say, are you ready to pay the price that it takes to do that? Success leaves clues, but very few people ever know the story of sacrifice that it took to get to be successful. Yeah. They just see the success and they say, wow, and I think that's just such a powerful thing. I think people are out there right now fired up. They're probably going to go out and I want to buy something from Sorinex right now because just the story behind it. It's because I'll get into this a little bit later, but there is a quality with your equipment. You guys are innovators.
Thank you.
It is built I say like a tank. It's indestructible stuff. But I think that's what goes into it. And we'll get into that later, but the quality is because there's blood, sweat, and tears. And if you're going to put your name on it, it's got to be the best.
Well, and I appreciate that. And it's funny, later in the 2000s when we really started kind of going, okay, let's take this more like a business versus just a passion that we get paid for every once in a while. And that's the downside, that we love it so much. Sometimes you go down the rabbit holes of trying to make it the best instead of trying to make it a great business. And so finally it was like, okay, I don't want to get in the situation again where I have to try to pay my dad back his life savings, or I have to go for X number of months without a salary and all this other stuff, which you gladly do. It's like your kids, you do whatever you had to do for them. But we said, okay, let's be better business. And it was kind of funny. One of the first business advisors said, well, the number one thing you don't do is name a company your own name, because you won't make real business decisions. You'll always be emotionally too tied to it to make, maybe ego will get in the way. Maybe pride will get in the way. Maybe when you should let go of the rope because you go, okay, it's too far gone. This ship cannot right itself. You're like, no, but this is my name. This is my identity. This is who I am, for better or for worse. And it keeps you holding on when you probably shouldn't. The good part about that is, though, it keeps you holding on when you shouldn't. And the times that if you survive, you can look back and go, everyone else on the planet would have probably let go. And they didn't, because foolishly, my last name is Sorin and so is my dad's. And so in some ways you tie that to your self-worth of who you are and go, okay, I can't fail. Maybe this is failing currently, but I won't fail. And then you just keep going and keep going and keep going. And then the tough times don't last. And then the storm calms down, and then you just keep going. And you kind of, I heard a story, and I'm sure you've probably heard it, but it was like a donkey, and he was walking and he fell down a well. You heard the story, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And he goes down the bottom, and he tries to get out and trying to jump out. And of course he can't, because it's too deep. And then so his friends gather around, and they kind of kept telling him, like, hey, stop tiring yourself out. Just kind of like lay down and die. You don't want to die, fatigued. It's just like kind of accept it. And they're all yelling. And the more he jumps, the more they're yelling at him, like they're crying, going like, stop. Well, finally he's pulling on the sides of the well so much that it actually caves in the well and widens out the walls where he's able to walk out. And basically they're like, well, why did you keep going? We were telling you to stop. He's like, well, I'm deaf. I thought you were cheering for me. Yep. And I just love that. And I'm just like, it's all how you view what everyone's thinking or don't view it. And if you believe that it's still supposed to work, and that's what we've always believed, this will be really successful one day and we'll change the strength world. And people laughed at us, and people were like, oh, that's a little, son and dad thing, and that's a cute little company, and those guys are cool for the industry. And we just were like, no, we think we could do some really amazing things here, and we think that we have valuable ideas, and maybe how we do business or how we could innovate, we think that could be valuable, and we're just going to keep going, because I don't want to say it, we're more artists than we are business people. There's something in here that has to get out. So if that art always has to come out, or that idea, or that design has to come out, then whether you're paying us or not, we would do it because it's in there. And you do it long enough, and then maybe people go, okay, fine, we'll listen. And I wouldn't say we're the best. We're good at what we do, but who could say who's the best and who's the worst? I don't know, but we try hard.
Oh, I think you guys have great stuff. And this is the whole thing. It comes down to, leadership. And, before you can lead others, you first have to lead yourself. And for the young people out there that are listening, because we've got all ages, but especially some of the young athletes, how did that process look like for you? So where, like today, you're leading a company,
It's crazy.
it's amazing, how things have progressed. But before anybody can ever lead others, they have to learn to lead themselves. What did that process look like for you in learning to lead yourself, especially through those college years and those type of things?
Right.
Can you elaborate that for our young people maybe listening?
Sure. That's a great question. I finally started cracking the code of the effort and consistency, and then realized that and I started looking at averages, and this was back when I was 19 or 20, I started looking at averages. If I noticed that the athletes on the team that were very, very highly talented generally were the lowest motivated, and the athletes of the lowest talent were generally one of the higher motivated. So I noticed all of them kind of ended up in the middle. They canceled each other out and they ended up in the middle, except for like 2 or 3 athletes who had high talent and high drive. The weird part is, well, I say there's about 4 or 5 of them in my career, and all of them became Olympians and national champions. So I watched this and I was like, oh, so if you could shift your trajectory, and regardless of where you are in the talent pool, effort outlast everything. You could out effort. I beat a ton of people that were genetically more gifted just because I was like, I'll just do the stuff they won't do, and I'll do it more and I'll do it longer. And the times they forget, and I started looking for, like, what I do now in business too is look for the white space in the business world and then the industry. I used to do that in college. I said, okay, everyone's going to go home for a college break. We were out for 4 weeks. Most people are going to go partying, they're going to go drink, and they're going to take this many days off, they're going to do this, this, this. And I would schedule that as like, that's when my training would ramp up, because I could sleep longer, I could eat more, I don't have any other things to do. And I would go, I want this percentage PR coming back from Christmas break than when I left. And then, so say if I picked up 2.5% and everyone else went down 2 to 3%, well, I just got a 5% delta on everybody. And then I do it again in the summer with 3 months. And now if I could go up 5%, everyone they have a great summer and hang out in the lake and do all this other stuff, and they go down 5 to 10%. Well, I just picked up a 15% delta on everyone. And I figured out that like interest in the bank, if you give me 5 years of doing that, you can't catch me my 5th year, or I'll catch you by the 3rd year and pass you. And I just looked at in what I consider the industry. These are all the athletes. Where do I have white space where I can start making up ground? And then later in my career, I learned Don Babbitt, he's still the throws coach at University of Georgia. He had a really great way to look at competition. And I adopted that probably back in 2002. He called it the fortress. And every time I would do something positive, and he's the one that told it to me, and then I kind of turned it into my own thing in my head. Every time I did something for training positive, whether that was made a workout, maybe had a great workout, had a PR in a workout, had a great throw, had a technical breakthrough, a meal, like I would search for what I would call bricks. I would build a mental fortress in my head. I would literally see this castle in my head. And every time I did something positive, I was picking up bricks and stacking it, and this castle just kept growing in my mind. And that was my fortress that I would go into competition with. We would go into battle. And so I would got to a point where I was a hunter of positive things that I could do. I would go, oh, I can make sure, you know what? I'll drink an extra quart of water right now because I know that's going to get me more hydrated. And I saw it just like shoving money into a piggy bank. And I'd walk around and just look for wins. And I would consider them wins. I'm like, how many wins can I get today? Because if you win a lot, you get used to winning. And then I'd go into it. So now I walk into a competition day, and in my mind, I've won 300 times this week because that's what I do. I'm a winner. I win stuff. I haven't competed against anyone. I was competing against myself and my own habits. But I walk in and say the first throw is bad. I look, my fortress is so tight and is so big and so robust. I go, That's fine. That an arrow just bounced off my fortress. No problem. I got 2 more throws. You're not a loser. You win. You make good choices. You do the right stuff. You put in your homework. It's just 1 throw. And I built that over the course of years. And of course, now, let's say that competition, I came back on my 2nd throw. I had a PR on my 3rd throw, won the meet. Well, I just saw like a whole wing of my fortress being built in my head. I go, I just proved to myself I win. That's how I build this thing. And eventually you get such a mental idea of what it is that you could go through some really rough times because you have a log of positive things. And it sounds maybe delusional, it sounds maybe like egotistical, but I believe you have to have that positive thinking, but it has to be founded in some sort of evidence, right? I wasn't just walking around like, I'm the best guy because I don't want to be the best. No, I found reasons to actually move the needle. And that's what I would say for a guy that wasn't overly talented, got into the game somewhat late. I was able to hang with the big boys because I was constantly looking for ways to build that.
That's gold. I mean, people that are listening right now, I mean, there's just so many things. And this is what I love. And this is why we really like to have guys like you on the show, because what you're actually doing is you're investing in people. You know, you're not just sharing your life experience, but people that are hearing this, it's an investment in their life, and it could be the spark, that gets somebody off the couch or put the game console down, the Switch, whatever it may be, and take that step out and become a winner. So I love that.
Well, and it's all been from people doing the same with me. I have been ridiculously blessed with mentors and people that would stop and have a burger or a beer with me or after competition, and they would sit and I would get, but I would find those too, and I would pay my dues. If there was an Olympian that I was throwing against, I'd make it a point to invite him to dinner. If I had $50 total and he ate $38 worth, then I wasn't getting something good. But it was more worth for me to invest in that. And if he wanted to sit there and drink beer all night till 2 a.m, I'd sit there with him and I would ask every question under the sun. And maybe after that 4 or 5 hours, I'd pick one thing up, and it was maybe the brick theory or something. I was able to take that, and the whole drive home, I think about it, make it my own. And I burned the gas. I went around the country for a long time and hunted excellence, and then tried to dissect what that was, that the commonalities were, and then just try to put it in my own life. So yeah, without those mentors, not those people that took time with me, I'd be a skinny kid that went to South Carolina and did some stuff.
Well, it's awesome. It's an awesome story. I really want, if you can take some time to share with people, Sorin started 40 years ago, and it's one of the most respected companies in the world of strength and fitness. Again, you guys are innovators. You have pieces that, you were the developer. And I think what happens is a lot of people know Sorin like, oh, I have the glute ham roller, or I have this, or they have a piece of Sorin equipment, but they have no idea like the history and how all those innovations came. Especially with the glute ham roller, which I'm sure has been knocked off many times, but that's another, that's the most popular thing I see. Everybody talks about that. Even people that aren't that familiar with the strength and fitness world, that's just been a game changer for them. But can you share that whole Sorin story a little bit, like in a nutshell, so people understand, it didn't happen overnight,
No.
Because today everybody's like, oh, do you have this piece or do you have that piece? But they have no idea how this thing came about.
Yeah, it's weird. The interesting thing, there's very few times that someone says, hey, build me something that does this, or we need a thing that does this. A lot of times it's just the exploration. And I really enjoy music, and I'm totally not musical whatsoever, but I enjoy the stories behind, when someone came up with a great riff or a lyric or something. I enjoy the muse portion of it. But so I kind of look at it and go, okay, that was kind of like when we came up with the landmine. Mm-hmm. We weren't setting out to make a piece of equipment that would sell well. That wasn't an idea at all. It was, I think this is an interesting feel when I do this. What problem does this solve? Is there a problem here? I'd like to do this exercise. How could we change this? So it was all driven to, it was driven to solve a problem. I was training for the 2000 Olympic trials in the hammer throw. I was taught by Judd Logan and Susie Powell that if you take a bar and you do this with it, it works the core real well. Judd called it Ninos for a Mexican coach that taught them to him in the 80s. And then later, after building the landmine, I was talking to Pavel Satsouin, and he called it the full contact twist. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I walk in the gym, and I said, hey, Pops, I want to do this, and I want to try this exercise. And it was just the brilliance that he has. And he was literally in the middle of his set, and he looked over, he goes, take the universal joint off this, put a pipe on it, boom, boom, boom. And he's like, it'll work great. And I was like, okay. And we went out in the shop and built it, and I just trained on it. And it wasn't for anyone else. It wasn't to sell. This was my little secret weapon. And we call it the landmine because it had it built explosion at ground level. And so it was like feet on the ground, building explosiveness, rotation. And it was probably the most knocked off, piece probably in the last couple decades, right? That everybody and their dog has. The glute ham roller, same thing. My shop manager, I got him into lifting. He was asking if we could do some more hamstring work. And I remembered a piece that we made 15 or 20 years ago for an athlete that had a birth defect and his hamstrings were super tight. And so we made him a roller, and we would actually statically load him from the top and help him stretch out after workouts. And we're trying to get his running gait. And I was like, oh, you could do this, but I used to use it with an ab roller, but then the wheels would switch back and forth. And I said, well, hold on. And I just literally walked out in the shop and pulled scrap pieces of metal out of a bucket and tacked them together. I was like, hey, if we do this, it'll probably work. And that's the glute ham roller. I mean, it's literally 98% exactly of that first iteration, probably our best-selling piece of all time. Or the diamond bar, full-length trap bar. Well, we came up with that. The whole idea was I wanted to do pressing overhead with a trap bar, but a regular bar wouldn't fit in a rack. Mm-hmm. So let's just make it longer. So again, it's always just those who explore the corners and find where there's, again, that white space. What are people not doing right now that isn't just to do it, but actually makes some real sense, and there's an advantage. And then you have to have a hardware piece and an application that goes with it. So really, that's kind of what we run everything at Sorinex off of.
And, how amazed are you that the landmine has caught on? I mean, for good and bad. I mean, I know for you guys it's bad because everybody they don't even change the name. It's called landmine no matter who you get it from. But how amazed are you that people have, that's a staple in every gym now, the home gym, no matter where you're at, somebody's got a landmine, it's just such a powerful piece of equipment. Did you ever think that you'd be developing something that would become kind of a phenomenon in the strength and fitness world?
We thought so. Maybe like the auto spot bench that Pops did in the late 80s, early 90s. We thought that was kind of the thing because it, saves your shoulders, and that was great. But I think it was still ahead of its time. And then I've also learned since then, generally something that's very small and has a jillion uses and is relatively inexpensive has just a bigger, wider appeal, of course. So the landmine just fell into it, and it was made it for, that's why I laugh. It's like, gosh knows how many of them are in the world, but it was from a skinny South Carolina hammer thrower that wanted to throw far. And it's like, I find the absurdity in that hilarious because it's like, the least popular sport on earth has spawned one of the most popular, exercise pieces. After that hit, and then of course when we started playing with it, we came up with rotational, different snatches and all these variations. We go, wow, this thing is really valuable. And for probably the first year, I just trained with it, and I would show coaches when they would come in. I said, hey, this is kind of cool thing we made. We weren't really making it to sell. But after a few years of, oh, this is how this works. And we laughed like, who knew it would have been the landmine? For years, when I meet people, they're like, oh, you're the landmine guy. I'm like, well, if that's what you think, I guess. But it's kind of funny. But I don't know. We kind of understood at that point that it was maybe that's the direction it goes. But it's kind of like writing a hit song. Like if you fall kind of into it once, it's maybe easier the second time, but it's not a guarantee, you know. And then the glute ham roller was a hit, and we've had some other good ones that have really caught on, but we have a better idea how to do it now. But it's still, you can't just come up with something, just do it. It has to have a use.
Oh yeah, and like the grip stuff. I mean, again, your dad being one of the OG grip guys,
Yeah, first captain of Crush.
Yeah, John Brookfield was my strength mentor when I first started getting into doing shows and stuff. And so I remember when his very first book, there's a big picture of your dad and they're pinch gripping the 45s up the front. So that's how I
remember the picture of John and my dad in that book together. I took that picture when I was a kid.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
So when the first time that John and Dad met, John came by the gym, I was there. And John actually brought a gripper. We still have it. And it was a really hard gripper, but it had the springs came down, and then they were actually butt welded to the handle instead of going into the handle. And John handed it to my dad, goes, "Hey, can you close this?" And when Pops did it, it actually broke the weld, and it fired it across the room and poked him in the hand, in the other finger, and he was bleeding everywhere because the weld hit him. And John's like, "You broke my gripper?" And I'm like, "Oh, like we didn't know any better."
That's ridiculous.
It was just crazy. Yeah, and we still have it. It's actually down at downstairs in the grip area. But I just remember that stuff as a kid. That was just kind of random stuff you saw all the time. I remember when he came up with the blob, and the half the 100-pound, and I was a kid, probably 8-9 years old, and I'd go over to his house, and he's like, "I'm gonna lift that thing one day," and it was just on the garage floor, and I just remember kind of looking at it, and even as a kid, you're kind of like, it's big, but it's not that impressive looking, and he would just get so mad that he couldn't lift it, which I still find so interesting. That how do you have the expectation that you could do something when no one's ever done it? Mm-hmm. That was the thing that I still am in awe with Pops, with Richard, is that his drive for accomplishing things when there was no social media, there was no real magazine following that stuff. There was no fanfare. There was no grip training. There was no one that was doing it. And how do you squeeze so hard on something that you break blood vessels in your eyes and squeeze blood out of your hands and all this stuff when there's really, it's like having one of the greatest football games of all time with no crowd. Mm-hmm. It's a practice. Like, how do you get that excited about? Which that's why one of the biggest things I respect him for is just his absolute love for that iron game. And I've asked him a number of times, said, "Why did you go so hard?" He goes, "Because I found an old book about Herman Gorner." And he goes, "I was absolutely amazed." And he goes, "I wanted to know." He was like, he seemed like the strongest person I've ever heard of hand wise. And I wanted to know how I would measure up. And he goes, "I was just chasing those things and seeing if they were physically possible." And he's just like, gosh, for a guy in his early 30s when no one else is doing it, or to close at number 3 when it was deemed impossible for years, and he would just, he was just trained to do it. And so, but that goes back to that unfettered, quit. He's not going to quit, even though you're not supposed to be able to do it. Sorinex wasn't supposed to last. It wasn't supposed to be successful. I was a skinny guy that went to college, and Dad wasn't even supposed to, he was supposed to do nothing in life, and for it to work, it's crazy. It's crazy. I don't know why. Something good will come of it.
Oh, it's worked. I mean, like I said, it's just so amazing, and I wish we had time to explore that. But just the whole idea of how important grip was to performance when it really wasn't anything on the map. I mean, when you talk about before Iron Mind and, these, like the OG guys, starting this, you just had the sporting goods gripper, that you could close like 200 times. People didn't know the importance. I remember going to John's and seeing his thick bars and stuff. People didn't train with thick bars back then. They didn't even know it. So that he had the intuitiveness and to follow like that book and just that intuition of understanding this carries over to performance. I think that's one of the things about Sorinex that's so powerful is you try to create stuff that carries over to performance. Is it going to benefit you? Is it going to be a game changer? We're going to develop it. And I think, that's just such a powerful lesson from you guys.
Thank you. And John Brookfield was an absolute innovator and just a complete beast. He did some things that first day that it was there, breaking chains and tearing thumb holes out of, and no one else was doing that for another 10 or 15 years. And just to get to see that when I was a kid was incredible. He actually came to our high school and did it for us.
Yep.
Or my middle school at the time.
It's awesome. I got to ask you, when did you start growing this epic beard? Is there a story behind it?
Yeah, so I had a bit of a beard, like a normal person beard, like an inch long or so, back when I was throwing the Highland games. And then I shaved it, back and forth. And then I decided, I can't remember when, 2012, maybe something like that, 13, 14, to grow a handlebar mustache. And it was fun. It was interesting. It was on brand. I enjoyed it. Pops had one in the 90s.
Yeah.
I figured I'd give it a shot.
Yeah.
And so I grew a big handlebar, and it was awesome. And it was terrible to take care of. You had to wax it all the time. And I'm pretty low maintenance because I'm kind of, low drag. I just like to kind of do what I'm doing and kind of not worry about the other stuff. So shaved it. And then I said, well, I was asked by Terry Todd to officiate the Mighty Mitts and some of the strongman stuff at the Arnold that year. So I was like, great, of course, we're in. And I was on the board of directors, and we were doing all this stuff, getting everything together. So I said, well, I'm 6-8 months out. Let me go ahead and start growing the handlebar mustache again. It'll be perfect for the Arnold. So instead of growing just a mustache, I grew a full beard, and then I just cut it into a mustache, a couple weeks out. Well, my wife is pregnant with my daughter, who's my middle child. And so as we get closer and closer, we're like, oh man, her birth is going to fall right on the Arnold. And so I had to call in and say, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this. I had to get a replacement, all this other stuff. And do you have kids?
I have 2. Yep.
Okay. So, like when you have kids for like the next 6 months, you don't know if you're alive or dead kind of thing.
That never really ends, actually. So.
Yeah. And so I had this pretty nice 9-month beard going that I was about to cut into. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And then we had my little girl, and then it's like sleepless nights. And it's like, yeah, the last thing I need to fool with is like really dialed in facial hair. But I kind of dig in the beard. I want to eventually do the handlebar, so I don't want to cut it. But I'll just kind of let it go for a second until I get my feet under me. And then about 8 months after that, I looked and I was like, I got a pretty big beard. It was like a year and a half. And then the wife at that point, she's like, are you going to cut that? I'm like, I don't know. Let me give it a second. And then 2 years into it, she said one day, she's like, you can't cut it now, because it was pretty big at that point. She's like, it's kind of like you now. It's just that's who you are. I'm like, really? I'm not like a beard guy. She's like, but you've kind of become a beard guy. And I was like, okay, fine. We'll let it go for a minute. And that was 7 years ago.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I've cut a couple feet off of it since then. But everyone has this like, think it's going to be some super cool story, and it's, I hate to say, it's just been a prioritization of other things. And then strangely enough, I could grow a big beard. Like, who knew? I didn't shave until I was like 30, but then I was able to grow a big beard.
So are you going to go like Mighty Adam? Are you going to like start pulling stuff with your beard and go all in that way?
I get pulled enough with it.
Okay.
Like the kids wrestling on me, or it gets hung and stuff. It's very much a safety hazard, but it's funny. I don't even really think of having it anymore. My wife, 7 years into it, she looked at me the other day. She goes, "You have a beard?" And I went, "Yeah." She goes, "No, but it's like a beard. I went, "Where have you been?" She's like, "I don't know. I just I look at you for who you are. I don't really, everyone talks about it." She goes, "Man, it's like giant." And I was like, "Uh-huh." She goes, "Huh." And I was like, "What have you been looking at for 5 years?" It was awesome. So that's the joke with her. I was like, "Hey, look, I still have it. Remember?"
It's still here.
Yeah.
A couple more questions. This was really interesting to me. How did you get involved in working with veterans and, supporting the armed forces, and then becoming involved with the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation?
Wow, you've done your research.
You're the man.
Jeez. So I've always been interested in the military. Like I said, I didn't serve, but I've always had high respect for the military and just for the sacrifice. I know that's thrown around very loosely, but the sacrifice and the intent to sacrifice. And being an athlete for so long, I realized my success was generally, I hate to say it because I was an individual sport, my success was based upon my ability to be selfish. I knew I had to lift that day, and I knew I had to eat, and I would suggest that you do it, but I really didn't care and partly because if you're in my event, here's an interesting story if we got time.
Sure.
So a story, you know who Al Order is, right? Al Order, the discus thrower. He was 4-time Olympic gold medalist in the discus until Carl Lewis did 4 long jumps. He was the most prolific Olympic athlete of all time. Of course, then since Phelps has done some things, but he was the guy. He was 1950s through the mid 60s. So he was like my hero. This guy, the discus thrower, big, strong guy. He never held the world record. He never won the Olympic trials. He never had the furthest throw walking into the event. And he won 4 Olympics with 4 lifetime best with 4 Olympic records. I mean, how can you be much of a better competitor as that? And it was amazing. So he was a story that he was telling one of my good friends, Derek Woodsky, who by the way, I would have on the podcast in a second, my favorite guy in the world to talk to. So Derek was telling me he was at a throws camp. And so Al was known as this just wildly ice cold competitor. When he's like, it's the Olympics, you'd die for him. This is what happens, you know? And so he's walking into his last Olympics. Now, Jay Sylvester had thrown first 70-meter throw. Like, he was the guy. Like, everyone knew Jay was if anybody was going to win, it was going to be Jay. There's a small chance of Al Order. So Al tells the story. He said Jay was a really tall guy, and they were walking into the stadium, and they're teammates, USA teammates. I don't know if you'd appreciate me telling this story, but Al's been gone a few years, so it's a great story. So they're walking into the Olympic Stadium in Mexico City, and there's a low-hanging piece of concrete in the stadium, and Jay was so tall that as he was sitting there talking to one of the other athletes, he hit it on his head and just dropped him. And they're literally walking out on the field to throw. Now, this is the best thrower in the world that just broke the world record. And Al Order said in his mind, he said, Jay hit the ground. He said, now they were friends. They were training partners and friends. He stepped over him, and in his mind, he went, that's one. And all he saw is that's one less guy between me and the gold. And it's like every 4 years, this is how we play this game. And you should have paid attention. And I saw that as like, wow, like that's a competitor. That's someone who's really, going after. I don't even know how I got on that story, but it's a great story.
I love it.
What was the
Single
question,
focus.
Sorry.
Well, we were talking about veterans and then the global terrorism memorial.
Okay. So athletes, I found, are generally selfish. I had to be very selfish. I had to have that mindset. But what I started seeing was the veterans I was hanging out with, they were always concerned to the man to the right and the left of them. And I found that so beautiful as I became a father and I became a leader, that I kind of recoiled away a little bit from the athletes because I've been so self-centered for so long, and I was around it, and the showboating and the look at me, and like how the Dennis Rodman stuff of the 90s, and like great player, but like, okay, give it a rest, and I just fell in love with people that were wildly capable, and literally, they literally sign a paper that is their death warrant, and it's up to kind of fate and tactics and everything else if it gets cashed in. And they walk into that knowing that I've signed my name on this line, that I might not come back. And I find that just such a beautiful, haunting, but inspiring thought that you could lay down your life for those who you don't even know, and for an ideal that the world could be a better place. And so I have so much respect for the veterans, but because we both cared about what we were doing so much, although part of our history was dissimilar, we had a lot of similarities. They were always looking for the white space. They were always looking for the challenge, for the strenuous life. They were passionate about what they were doing. And so the other good part is we came from different parts of the world and parts of athletics versus military. So there was no chest beating and there was no competition. Marines generally don't like Navy guys. And, it's like all the thing. Hey, I was none of them. I was a guy that could help you with human performance, and I appreciate what you do. and we both like shooting guns. Fine. And then those guys didn't have to worry about, oh, you were in Fallujah or you weren't in Fallujah. Like, oh, I see you as valuable. You're an interesting person. So we started getting these bonds, and I found it very inspirational, but I also saw something in many cases that was missing from their life or their experiences that hopefully I could help them with. And so we were able to build some real good relationships, and some of my closest friends were former military and high up in some military organizations. And I just love the divergent thinking model, and especially some of those organizations that, development groups that do things that, okay, this is off script, but we're gonna solve the problem. And that just speaks to who I am and who I want to be in my soul. And it's because of that, I was able to become, I guess, a little bit more well-known within that community. And then I was asked, I was exceptionally honored, asked by Mike Rodriguez to be one of the ambassadors for the global war on terror. And what he said, I said, well, Mike, terror memorial. So we're building a memorial in DC that is for the global war on terror, which is still running. So just because Corona is going, it doesn't mean that the war isn't still going. It's the longest running war in American history, and it's our first multi-generational war. So fathers are watching their sons fight in the same caves that they fought in 20 years prior. And it's sad to think that it's still going on and people are still dying. And so just as there's a Vietnam War memorial, World War II, everything else, we're lobbying to get a global war on terror memorial done. And we've jumped through a lot of the hoops, and we're getting it really close, but we do need some help dollars wise. And so if you want to look it up, GWAT, Global War on Terror, and hit me up if you'd like to help out. But they asked me because I have contacts and influence in not only the military world, but in the athletic world or whatever it may be. And I said, but I didn't serve. And they go, yeah, but you're of the same heart and the same mind of this, and we feel like you could be valuable to the cause. And I said, well, I was unable to go over there and serve, and hopefully I could move the needle a little bit here. So I'm extremely honored to be able to do it.
And you understand that principle of honoring those who deserve honor. And that just, to me, that resonates with your character as a person so much, because, that's what it's all about. That we want to honor. They share their strength instead of hoarding their strength, and they deserve to be honored for that.
They do. And because as much as I'd like to think it, and I've had, all those guys like, oh, you'd have made a great special ops guy or SEAL or this, that. And I go, I'd like to think I would have, but here's the caveat. I didn't. We'll never know. And I'd like to think I wouldn't quit. I'd like to think I could do that, but I'll never be tested in exactly that way. So I there's no way I would sit here and go, I'm one of you guys. I'm not. I'm not. I don't have the opportunity, nor I'll never be able to wear that trident or that insignia, and I'm totally okay with it. And please, and a lot of them say, well, our community, and I'm like, well, your community. No, it's our community. You're in it. And I'm like, I appreciate that, but let's be real honest of job description here. So you got to honor those guys. I mean, and guys and girls too. I use guys, non-gender specific, but what they do, and the firemen, the policemen, like all the first responders, they do a thankless job, and I don't know if I could do it, and I appreciate it, and I fall in love with people that do things that I would have to think twice, 3 times, or 5 times whether I could hack it. And so whether it's easy for them, I don't think it'd be easy for me, and I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you. And let me ask one last question. Where can people go to learn more about Bert Sorin, Sorin-X? And is there anything else that you want to share? I mean, anything, that you're passionate about or that you want to share, feel free to do that.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, you could get me on Instagram at Bert Sorin, BERT, SORIN. Facebook, the same. Sorinx.com is our website. Sorinx on Instagram. We've started a new Sorinx Outdoors on Instagram. I'm a big outdoorsman. That's something I've always been around. I enjoy it. I love the truth of it. people can lie, people could hide their motivation, they could do a lot of things, and they could jockey for position. But if it's cold and rainy outside, it's cold and rainy outside. And that's what I love about nature is if you don't prepare for it, it'll kill you and it doesn't care. And I love the truth of that we could get down to the basic bottom line of what is occurring here. And if I don't prepare, whether it's gear wise or tactics or overreach my physical capabilities, I'm going to pay for it. And that's something that's exciting for me because it's a constant challenge. Going out in the river the other day fishing, it's a nice, beautiful day on the river, but the water comes up and something happens. You better know how to get out of it. And that little excitement of this is much greater than I am, and I'm just a little speck in its world, I find actually relaxing because it takes focus off of my paltry little things that I'm concerned about.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank Bert for you investing in all of our listeners today. Like I said, that this was a true investment in them. I want to thank our sponsors, ZionMissionaryChurch.net, NeuroPowerSource.com, our podcast producer, Drew Kiespert, film director, Jolyn Thomas. Be sure to rate us and subscribe to the Pressing the Limits podcast. For more ways to watch and listen to this podcast, check out the Pressing the Limits podcast website.